Well, what on earth is going on in the US where an alleged murderer is being hailed as some sort of hero? Luigi Mangione has worryingly and quite weirdly reached folk hero status online after allegedly killing the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. And have a look at this from a dance party in Boston when his image was played to the crowds. Joining us now is Based Politics co-founder, journalist and commentator Brad Polumbo. Brad, good to see you. Can you explain to us what is going on here? Because it just seems like young people are idolising this alleged murderer.
Yeah, I mean, it's mental illness, it's deranged, it's strangely bloodthirsty. I mean, we're actually even seeing online across TikTok and many social media platforms, young people not just praising the man who allegedly gunned down a man and a father of two in cold blood, but thirsting after him, turning him into some sort of sex symbol. They're all sharing a shirtless picture of him and basically, I mean, lusting after him in a truly bizarre way. I mean, it's one thing to have criticisms of the US healthcare system, which is deeply, deeply flawed, or to even argue that insurance companies are like a big part of the problem or that this CEO is some evil guy. I'm not necessarily convinced of that last part, but to support or to encourage extrajudicial killings of people in the streets, no trial, no due process, just because you hate their business or you hate their company, to act like that's some sort of noble thing is actually scary how widespread that sentiment is, because if they kept going down that path, that could take America to a truly dark place indeed.
Yeah, it's incredibly worrying, the response to that murder. I want to talk to you about Donald Trump because he just keeps on winning. Days after being named Time Magazine's Person of the Year, he's been awarded $23 million in compensation after the ABC defamed him as a rapist. Brad, this is a massive loss for the ABC. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, this is a huge deal. So ABC News host George Stephanopoulos basically made a huge mistake on air and described Trump as being held civilly liable for rape, when in fact the jury in New York considered that charge and did not find him liable for it. They found him liable for two other charges instead. So it's a huge mistake, but I will admit I was honestly quite surprised to see this development that they settled for such a large figure to compensate him, because we have very, very high standards for defamation in the United States. So typically you can say almost anything about a politician, even if it's untrue, and get away with it. I think they must have been worried about what would come out in the wash. Maybe there's more that we don't know about. Maybe they don't want their emails and their information going through a discovery process where people would get a chance to lift the lid and bring some sunlight into what's happening inside these mainstream media outlets. But it was a really shocking story. And like you said, it is a huge win for Donald Trump and a huge black eye and massive embarrassment for the mainstream media, in particular ABC News.
It certainly is. Now, look, Brad, there's something very odd going on in the skies above New Jersey, where mysterious drones have been reported by thousands. And now local officials are taking matters into their own hands. They claim the Department of Defense and Joe Biden are refusing to help. Have a listen to this.
Sheriff Golden wrote me a few days ago requesting legislation to empower the state police to seriously protect at-risk persons and infrastructure, and if necessary, bring down a dangerous drone or drones.
Now, among all the conspiracy theories which have emerged, I've got to say this was quite funny because Trump has taken to X to troll former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Have a look at this, sharing an image of Christie enjoying a McDonald's Happy Meal delivered by the drones. Brad, so many unanswered questions about these drones. What's actually happening? Whose drones are they?
Well, the crazy thing, Danica, is that we don't know days into this strange phenomenon where people are seeing these very large clearly identifiable drones in New Jersey, and you're seeing them across social media. People are reporting them. We don't know what they are. The government won't tell us, and I refuse to believe that they don't know. I really find that hard to believe that the federal government don't know, though it is possible that some branches of the government know and some don't. I think the most likely explanation is that these are our drones, that they are some form of government drone that belong to the CIA or some branch of the federal government, because otherwise you get into weird territory like aliens, but that doesn't make sense that they would use technology so similar to US or other countries' drones. Or could they belong to another country? Because then I find it very hard to believe that the US wouldn't have blown them out of the sky. I mean, do we really not have sovereign airspace anymore? The whole thing is a strange and perverse story, but it does go to show kind of the credibility crisis in our federal government under this Biden-Harris administration. I mean, you've got Alejandro Mayorkas, top Biden official, on TV saying, oh, people are mostly just confused. These are the kind of drones you can just buy at a store. No, sir. I mean, some of them are 7 to 8 feet wide. That's not something you can just buy at a store. They're flying in patterns. They're confusing people and scaring people. And people want to be able to look to our government and get real answers and trust them, but they have a credibility crisis. And it's in moments like this when that's a real problem.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump has said either identify them or shoot them out of the sky. So he knows where he stands. Back on Donald Trump and JD Vance, they received a very warm welcome when they attended the traditional Army versus Navy football game over the weekend. But Brad, what got my attention was the national anthem. Trump was saluting, Vance was standing to attention. It seems like patriotism is back.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me that they found a receptive audience there. The military is overwhelmingly supportive of them. And it is funny to me because I saw people online complaining that when they were watching this game, they barely showed Vance and Trump. But when you watch an NFL game, it'll cut to Taylor Swift 10 plus times. And who knows if that's true? I didn't tune in. I'm overseas right now. But I think it's interesting what pockets of life you'll see huge public displays of patriotism and support for Donald Trump and JD Vance, and which ones you won't. And it tells you something about American culture that he's so overwhelmingly popular in kind of everyday recreation and sports like the NFL, or not the NFL, like college football, or like UFC fights. And yet in Hollywood or kind of elite circles in those camps, he would get a very different reception. So I think that we're seeing America silo off in ways that's interesting, but also revealing in terms of our cultural phenomenon and how politics intersects with it all.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Brad. Now, look, before we let you go, the Department of Education spent at least $1 billion DEI hiring, programming and mental health training in America's schools since 2021. Brad, unbelievable. What sort of nonsense ideology is being peddled in these departments?
Yeah, look, burn it all down, figuratively, of course. But the idea that they're using $1 billion of our money, Americans struggle to afford groceries these days, but we're being taxed to fund toxic, divisive politics based around identity, teaching some groups are inherently good and inherently oppressed and virtuous, and some are inherently bad and oppressors. And the stuff that has been shown, a lot of these diversity trainings, to not only not work, but to actually actively make things worse, to prime people to become offended unnecessarily, to see discrimination where there is none. I find it deeply concerning, but actually pretty unsurprising that the federal government is spending so much of our money. And this is just the Department of Education. So just one federal agency funneled into these kinds of toxic programs. I'm hoping that Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and others involved in the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, will lift the lid on all of this and stop this. But it's easier said than done because the US federal government is truly a behemoth. It is very good at covering up for itself and resisting this kind of sunlight. But when we do, we can see what's going on, and most of the American people aren't supportive of it. And it's not about being against racism or against discrimination. No, DEI trainings and materials and advocacy goes far beyond that into territory that I think most people would find actually divisive in its own right and often alienating. So this should all be defunded and really prompt a lot of introspection as to how we ever ended up putting people in charge and in power that ever thought something like this was a good idea.
Yeah. Brad, we have loved having you as part of the show this year, and we want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and we really look forward to having you part of the program again in 2025. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.